This video was recorded in front of a live virtual audience. Hello everybody, Dacob here. Welcome back to the Fashion Bunker. Surprise, surprise. We're going to be reviewing something dark and light perhaps at the same time. We're going to be reviewing something that, thanks to a very dear friend of mine, Rich Mitch, has come to my attention, and that would be ENCENS MYTHIQUE by GUERLAIN. So I have been going for it these couple of days since it arrived to the Fashion Bunker. And I'm going to spray it away right away because... Okay, give it a second. While that second goes, if you like my channel and my content but haven't yet subscribed, now is the chance. Push that subscription button and subscribe to my channel today. You can also push the join button next to the subscription button and become a member today and gain access to extra perks in the Fashion Bunker. You can also join me on Patreon, superdacob all spelled together, gain access to extra perks there as well. Thank you to all my members and patrons who have already pledged. Without you, the Fashion Bunker would not be here. And actually, purchase like this one would not have been possible. So thank you so much for that. Also, thank you to my co-chatters who are live with me on the sidebar here, being so lovely, and they're going to co-review the fragrance with me. Thumb up this video if you're liking it, and push the notifications button to get notified whenever a new video or live stream get posted. ENCENS MYTHIQUE by GUERLAIN. The nose behind it is Terry Vassa or Terry Vassa. Okay, so Rich Mitch and I last week in the last live stream, we made together a collaboration video about perfumes to wear to a funeral. Link in the card section up above, but also in the description box down below. Check that video out as well. It sounds more gloomy than it is. The conversation that we had was way more light and constructive than you might think. You might be afraid to push on a video called Perfumes to Wear to a Funeral or Perfumes to Wear at Funerals, because there's different types of perfumes for different types of funerals. But it's... Nobody dares make videos like that, but I think it's an important topic to talk about. So anyway, one of Rich's selections was ENCENS MYTHIQUE. And he spoke so poetically about it that he convinced me. I never do blind purchases of expensive stuff. But there was something in his voice that made it clear to me, okay, this is a must. Okay, so it arrives. I unbox it. I spray it. And time stops. Literally. So it's a rose with aldehydes in the opening notes. What do you got? Saffron, mid notes vetiver, pink pepper, patchouli, base notes, ambergris from New Zealand, olibanum / frankincense, and woodsy notes. Sounds quite simple, but this thing is far from simple. So Terry Vassa made it, the first edition of it came out in 2012, then it was reformulated in 2019, and this batch code 1B01 was produced in February of this year. Guerlain states on their own packaging, so I'm going to read to you what Guerlain says about this perfume. Fascinating and enigmatic, like a burning essence. Frankincense inspired the Guerlain perfumer. You see how they don't state it's Terry Vassa? I don't like when perfume brands do that. Louis Vuitton does that as well when they describe their fragrances. Because in case one day it doesn't work for them anymore, like it doesn't say his name. Maybe somebody else in the team. There's a lot of perfumers working together that never get mentioned at all. It's a pity, but that happens a lot. It's not a very fair community. Maybe somebody else also contributed to making this one. But however, his name is not listed. Unlike Chanel would always list Olivier Polge, Dior is very, very particular about listing François Demachy. Guerlain doesn't list. They just say, Fascinating and enigmatic, like a burning essence, frankincense inspired the Guerlain perfumer to create this oriental creation. Create creation. Whoever wrote this text is a... The fragrance, infused with an airy frankincense, is exalted with rose and enhanced by ambergris, adding an exceptional softness and depth. How can softness be deep? That's what this perfume is all about. It's such a delicate, soft, ethereal blanket of roses. But these roses, they are imbued in the driest smoke of incense. But the rose is a dewy rose. You see, the rose is wet. The incense is dry. And because the rose is wet, it covers up enough of the incense. And that's why a lot of people, I've read a lot of reviews on this one. A lot of people mention, or to a lot of people, this one doesn't smell incensey enough. To me, it's just right, the incense, because that's where the soft part of the depth, because incense is very deep. Okay, so when Guerlain when they themselves write that it's exceptional softness and depth, because the rose is dewy and wet, it covers up that dry, smoky incense that would be otherwise overpowering and overbearing, and it softens it down very delicately. It creates this blanket of air, okay? It's a blanket of air, of rosy air, that never lets the incense go up. The incense stays down. It's a soft blanket, okay? It doesn't permeate the air everywhere. It's controlled, it's subtle, it is masterful. This is when I say something is masterful. When the perfumer knows how to tackle, control, / go even further and dominate an ingredient, and especially an ingredient like incense, which tends to just overpower everybody. And usually people who just start dealing with perfumes or creating their own perfumes, they fall in love, with some specific genre of ingredients. And if you do happen to fall in love with incense, you're going to do, what perfumers do when they're just at the beginning. You're going to create a bomb of an incense perfume because you want to overdo it. You want to see how far you can push it. But it's when you become more masterful at it, when you become more savvy at how to deal and tackle with these ingredients, that you learn how to rein it back in, and you learn how to dominate these ingredients by not letting them dominate your composition. And this is the sexy part about this perfume, because that incense, it's in chains. It's like locked. It's inside an SM relationship with the dewy, wet rose. And this is just the opening. I know that the incense is listed in the base, but it's already, because it's so masterful, it's already communicating with the rose, and the rose is on the top. So this is just the beginning. This rose is playing with this incense in the opening, and it's such a flirtatious, 50 Shades of Grey. Gray is the color of this one, by the way. Why is the color gray? Because the ambergris in here is an element that at the beginning, they always say while two are fighting or bickering, the third one is the one who takes advantage of the fighting, and usually the third party makes two parties fight so that it could win over. Well, that's what the ambergris does in this perfume. And I have been contemplating whether or not this is real ambergris or not. I was convinced it was synthetic ambergris before I smelled the perfume, because I was like, this can't be. But then Guerlain on their own website state that it's real ambergris from New Zealand. Thierry Vassa states that it's real ambergris from New Zealand. Truth be told, that ambergris imitation that we have in Sauvage from Dior, the Ambroxans and Co. Chemical. What you smell in here, the ambergris in here, let's go back to those roses and to that frankincense, okay? And they're the rose is keeping the frankincense toned down. But the entire time, the ambergris is observing this game, and this game, this flirtatious love affair that's unfolding on your skin because you sprayed the perfume on your skin, you gave it life on your skin. In the beginning, the ambergris is literally, you can imagine there's a wall, passage, and it's like just peeking behind that wall, looking what's going on between the rose and the frankincense. So there's the pink pepper, the patchouli, the vetiver, the saffron, and the aldehydes. There's everything is there as well, but it's the rose and the frankincense for me. And the aldehydes, so funny, they don't make the perfume sparkle. This one doesn't sparkle like a Chanel No. 5 would sparkle, that kind of champagne-y, bubbly aspect of aldehydes. You don't have that here. This aldehyde is utilized for something else. It's going to come in play later. It maybe hints at a soapy quality in the opening note, but again, the rose is queen. Okay, there is no soapy aldehyde dominating that rose. The rose is queen. It's a dark, black rose. Okay? And she's queen of this castle, of this dungeon, of this medieval dark dungeon. And she's having a love affair with the frankincense. The aldehydes are kind of like her guard. The aldehydes are standing there, waiting for something to happen. Because secretly, Thierry Vasse already knows the constellation. It's like he's writing his own version of Game of Thrones, and this ENCENS MYTHIQUE is the Game of Thrones of perfumery. He's always one step ahead. Thierry Vasse is always one step ahead. This is the guy who created the first formulation of Dior Addict. And you know how deep Dior Addict goes. But it's as if, like, after Dior Addict, much more has been learned and brought to the table. And now we have that aldehyde standing there, invisible, but ready to protect the queen. And the ambergris on my skin, it takes forever to warm up. And this is why it's not synthetic, you guys. Real ambergris needs time to melt. It needs a lot of time. For me, oh, it's so oily actually on the skin. It's still glistening. Wow, you guys. With the spotlights, for the first time I'm seeing it with such strong light, it has an oily texture on the skin. It's glistening. Okay, so it takes about sometimes an hour, depending how warm. Now it's quite hot here in the bunker with the lights, so it's taking less time. It's still not there yet, but I can tell you from memory. I've been wearing it for days now. An hour or two later, the ambergris, from peeking, watching that whole SM relationship between the rose and the frankincense, it just kind of steps out and shows itself finally like a ghost and comes to haunt the queen, the black queen rose. And it only has enough strength and energy because it sucked up, it's like a vampire. Okay, the ambergris is the vampire of this story. And it sucked my energy to be able to come to life because it didn't have that strength in the beginning. When I sprayed on the perfume, it's not there yet because it needs much more of my heat to start opening up and melting. And with enough heat gathered, it melts, it opens up, and it has enough energy to stand up on its own and show itself. It's ready for the battle. And the rose sees it. The ambergris wants to take over. And the rose says to the aldehyde guardian, step in. And the aldehyde starts battling the ambergris. That's where the aldehydes masterfully tone down the ambergris from becoming this overpowering intestinal indolic smell and give it a soapy and a ghostly version of a dead soap. And it's a soap that, well, soaps used to be made from whales. Ambergris comes from whales. So that aldehyde mimics a soap that used to be made from whales, from whale fat. So in fact, it's almost as if a part of the whale, this soap, aldehyde, is battling the ambergris, which is also. And if you join my YouTube channel, become a member or a patron, you get access to an exclusive video which you don't get to see on my public YouTube channel, which is a 1 hour long video dedicated to ambergris and its history and explanations as to all of the theories about ambergris. So you could check that video out if you're a patron or a tier 2 member on my YouTube channel. So the aldehyde is fighting with the ambergris. No, but the rose isn't just standing and looking. The black queen rose gets intrigued and a little bit horny for this ghost that's trying to possess her, which is the ambergris. And she jumps into the battle. And this is where the rose, second hour in, disappears. Falls into the ambergris. And the rose is gone. Gone. And I can't sense it anymore. And the ambergris just comes out. And when it comes out, it dominates with the aldehydes. And it's an ambergris that it's like butter. It's a buttery ambergris covered up with that soapy element of aldehydes, which never let it become fecal. Intestinal fecal, not external. There's a big difference between indoles, the indoles that we have in Joy. The jasmine floral indoles are very different from ambergris indoles. If you've made it thus far in this review, I think you're passionate about perfume, so you're going to not be grossed out about what I'm about to say. But comparing the difference in these indoles is the jasmine indole is like an external fecal. It's like feces that are out there, been drying in the sun, and that's the smell you get. But plant-based, floral-based. Ambergris indolic smell is internal. This fecal indolic smell is still in the intestines. It's still wet. It hasn't exited yet. It hasn't had any oxygen on it yet. It's a different type of indolic smell. That's a big difference between floral indoles and ambergris indoles. So the rose, the queen, falls into this ambergris and is gone. The ambergris is still utilizing my heat or the heat of your skin. If you spray it on your chest, you're gonna get to the ambergris much quicker than if you do it on the arm. If this were Ambroxan-based ambergris imitation, you would smell it from the get-go. It would be there immediately. But because this is real, this is the real deal. It takes time. It literally takes time to get to that place and when it gets to that place. Okay, so now the rose has disappeared, hour 2, 3. After hour 5 or 6, on my skin, that rose has been fiddling-diddling with the ambergris. All of a sudden, it reappears. It tries to dominate it one last time. And it pops out of the freaking blue. It's like it's been drowning in the ocean of ambergris. No air. No oxygen. And it was gasping to try to get back to the surface. And somehow, it manages to get back to the surface. And out of the blue, you thought, well, yeah, okay. I thought to myself the first time I sprayed the perfume, yeah, but the rose, when it's gone, it's gone. It's like, it's a fleeting smell, the smell of rose. A lot of perfumers, use it as something in the opening and then it's gone. But this rose, again, masterfully blended. It disappears and then reappears. And once it's reappeared, it's been hurt. It's vulnerable. It's a bleeding rose. It's a crying rose. It's a wet rose, wetter than it was at the beginning. But the ambergris at this point has so much power. It has grown so much with the heat of my body because it's that vampire that's sucking up on my heat. It's become so powerful that it doesn't even need the rose anymore. So it just stands there looking at it, just looks at it, slowly fading away and dying. And the fading of that rose on the skin, blended with the ambergris, I got goosebumps just now saying it. It moves you to tears, not because it makes you sad, but because it's as if the rose knew that very Game of Thrones. It's like the rose finds pleasure in this newly found SM relationship, and it now wants not to be the tormentor, but the tormentee. And it finds pleasure in dying under the watchful eye of the ambergris. And there's this, it moves you to tears because the ambergris knows that it's going to win. There is no question about it. So it doesn't need to use force anymore. It's grown to a point where it takes over everything. And it just watches, and it allows the rose to feel that pleasure, that suicidal pleasure in a way of just dying on the skin. And that moves you to tears because there's this total embrace and acceptance of death. And it's so total. It is so completely infinite that it moves you to tears because it becomes eternal. And when a perfume can make you smell death as an acceptance of eternity, well, then you found your match. You found something that's going to remind you every day of your life when you're wearing it that it's okay. It's okay. It's okay that your life isn't forever. It's okay that you will one day be no more. Because there's a beauty to that as well. There's a beauty to nature in ceasing to exist within a conscious plane that are our lives. You know, they say animals live in complete harmony with nature. They embrace death and accept it. There's no discussing it. It's us humans who try to convince ourselves that there is no such thing as death. Well, this perfume actually, this perfume is death. So it moved me to such a point that it triggered me within seconds after my whole journey. By the way, this one lasts days on the skin, on clothes. I started testing this like a couple of days ago. The clothes that I wore the other day, it's still on it. It doesn't go off. It doesn't leave. It does not leave the clothes. On the skin, 20 hours, on my skin at least. So powerful that it moved me so much that it inspired me to write a poem. And then that poem dedicated to this perfume became part of this review. So here goes. We're going down into the depths of the ocean. So deep. There is no light left to seep through the weight of millions of years of salt and what you cannot swim there. You cannot breathe
motionless, surrounded by a primordial womb, floating without moving, still and eternal.
And that is ENCENS MYTHIQUE. It's So some of you are a little bit surprised by me being a go back with this velvet that absorbs everything. Good. Sleepy94 says he's getting weirder. Really? I don't think so. But people are feeling uncomfortable. Well, that's the point. Embrace it. This uncomfort is just because you're feeling it, because it's reflecting something that you feel inside, and you feel uncomfortable dealing with it. You should deal with it. Now, listen. Let me get quickly to this particular poem. The idea for me that ENCENS MYTHIQUE represents, in particular, is let's just dissect the poem together so you're going to understand. The poem is part of the review. It is actually a review aspect of the fragrance. So we're going down into the depths of the ocean. While wearing this perfume, you're literally sinking, okay? So deep there is no light. You know that water filters light. So the deeper we go into the ocean, there's less and less light penetrating it. At one point, you're in total darkness. But not just that. The deeper you go, the heavier the water is. So the pressure builds up. So at a certain point, you get so squished by that weight that you cannot move anymore. So it's so deep there. So it's so deep, there is no light left to seep through the weight of millions of years of salt and water. Oceans are the oldest parts of our planet. They are billions of years old. So the salt and the water have been there forever. The concept of forever doesn't really apply to our planet because it is finite. But what seeps through is usually water. Water seeps through things. But I've psychologically inverted that concept. So what I made seep through, and I said, so deep there is no light left to seep through. So all of a sudden, usually we're upset when water seeps through something. You got to dry up the water. But in this case, the roles are inverted. There's no water seeping in. Now it's the light that is trying to seep into the water, but it can't because we're so deep inside that no light can seep through. But we're giving light a value. We're contextualizing it as if it had the value of water. And of course, I add the element of salt and water because we are in the water and it is the ocean. There's salt in there as well. You can't live off of that water. It would poison you. You would die. So you cannot swim there because you're compressed by that weight. You cannot breathe there because you would inhale the water. And you can only stay motionless and embrace and accept your fate. You're surrounded by a primordial womb, and that primordial womb is Mother Earth and the ocean, in this particular case, nature, floating without moving. Now I'm giving you the feeling when death becomes her. It's so heavy, this whole ocean on top of you, okay? And you're motionless. And yet, once you give in to it, all of a sudden you are relieved. And you feel like you're floating, even though you're motionless, you can't move. You feel like you're floating without moving. You become still and eternal. And once you become eternal, you have become one with the world. You are dead. And so that's the poem I dedicated to ENCENS MYTHIQUE, or better said, ENCENS MYTHIQUE inspired me to write this poem. And now I explained it to you, what actually it means. And then I recorded it in single words, just to create that anxiety of like not having that breath between every word. So they're rhythmically from a performance perspective, I do come from, I studied art, from performance art. So I decided to give it a tact and a rhythm that literally goes, instead of, if I read the poem to you, I would say like, we're going down into the depths of the ocean. So deep there is no light left to seep through the weight of millions of years of salt and water. You cannot swim there. You cannot breathe there. You can only stay motionless, surrounded by a primordial womb, floating without moving, still and eternal. But if you dissect this, like you would dissect the elements, the ingredients of the perfume, then every word has its own echo. Every word has its own meaning. And every word has a pause between it. So it becomes it extraneates you. It means you feel like you're detaching from the symbology of the words themselves. So if I were to read this poem again, like I did in the video, saying like, we're going down into the depths of the ocean, dung, 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 dung. All of a sudden, you have this rhythm bouncing off. And it's almost like a mantra because you're repeating the same thing over and over again. Even though the words have different meanings, they're repeated in the same rhythm. And that's how this perfume pulsates, vibrates on the skin. So I try to render the vibration of the perfume through the way, describing the vibration of the perfume on the skin through the edit of this particular short clip within this video, telling you how, through this poem, explaining to you in other words how this perfume makes me feel. And it fills you up to here with that soapy ambergris sadness. I've never smelled an ambergris like this. I've never smelled something so completely encompassing to a point where it leaves you no choice but to love it because it is so total. It is so complete and it is so deep but soft, heartless but embracing. Like nature and the ocean, they don't have a heart. Nature is heartless. When a hurricane hits, an earthquake, tsunami, everything, full volcano eruption, there's no remorse. There's no regret. Nature does not have a heart. Nature is the heart. And this perfume really explains that, really brings it to a point where you understand exactly where you're standing as a human being that is limited in time on this planet. This planet is all about nature. This planet is not about humans. We are just inhabiting it. But once we understand that we can work on it and accept the fact that we are a part of this nature, once we accept that, can we become eternal with nature? And that's what ENCENS MYTHIQUE smells of. Thank you for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it. Let me get to a couple of comments. Letty says, the rhythm sounded like a sonar underwater searching for the rose at the bottom of the ocean. Love it. Yes, I added that texture of atmospheric surround as well to give you the context of absence of light and more water, that fuzzy, that kind of sound that was there on purpose. Robert says, 10 out of 10 review. I am enthralled. Thank you, Robert. Olfactive says, I believe I would be a good subject for hypnosis, says Olfactive Stories. Sleepy94 says, I never smelled this, but so far it seems pretty gothic. Kira says, it smells like you make it sound and feel. It could very well be a new signature scent for me. Olfactive says, I feel cold. Olfactive Story says, funny, to me this fragrance is really uplifting. I spray it, get my leather jacket, and feel ready to kick ass. Maybe because you already have embraced nature completely, because nature does kick ass. Audrey says, I knew when I read your poetry the fragrance you were talking about. You captured it so well. Beautiful, darling Dacob. Thank you, Audrey. Mr. Philip Fabulous says, I always said your perfume reviews are poetry, and now it literally is. Thanks, Philip. Letty says, I love this. I'm getting a bottle. You did amazing with this review, my darling. I love your poetry. Thank you, Letty. Nicely done. Loved it, says Anna. Thank you, Anna. Donnie Terence Barrios. Love poem? Yes, a love poem. It is. To nature and to ENCENS MYTHIQUE. Jesus says, love it. Thank you. Brent says, take me there. Kira says, loved it. Jack says, OMG. Olfactive Story says, LOL. Drac says, fantastic. Thank you, Drac. Jack says, I trust Dacob enough to blind buy fragrances he reviews. We always have similar reactions to fragrances too. Also, this poem is so beautiful. Thank you so much. Ooh, giving me the shivers, Jack. Thank you. Louis says, people are feeling uncomfortable. Well, that's part of being an artist. You got to make people feel uncomfortable. You know why? Because you lift a mirror to their face. Shivers, says Lori. Sleepy94 says, what the F is happening? ASMR? In a way. I'm feeling cold again, says Olfactive. Lori says, I want this. I'm fascinated by this whole Orient collection. And I'm telling you guys, get it. Because I don't think this one's going to be around for much longer. Olfactive says, for sure you don't need to overspray that one. Oh, no, you don't. Dead becomes Dacob, says I'm Louis. Jesus, I know exactly what internal indoles smell like. My extended family used to sacrifice sheep during pagan holidays. It's a very scary smell. Yep, very scary. I don't know which perfume is being discussed, but I must have it. Axe B. We're discussing ENCENS MYTHIQUE. Jack says, the way you've described it is beautiful. I think I might just have to blind buy this. Leslie says, living on an island that made its name from whaling, the ambergris was gold. To the first inhabitants, Portuguese sailors, and local Wampanoag tribe. It has such a good sillage and projection, says Olfactive Stories. I wore it a lot last year. People could really smell it on me through their masks. Louis says, 2 perfumes, 1 cup. Oh, and by the way, another thing to note about this one, it smells different in every part of the body. I've tested it thus far. So when I spray it here, I get a different smell than when I spray it here. I get a different smell when I spray it on my chest, a different smell behind the knee, and in other parts of the body that shall remain unnamed here. But let me tell you, here you push more the soapy aspect. Here it gets more the metallic aspect. Here you get the saddest heated up ambergris. This is where the depth is at. Behind the knee, you get more the rose. Dacob needs to open an OnlyFans account and direct some perfume reenactments. Mr. Philip Fabulous. Could you imagine? This has been a special episode of Game of Thrones, uncensored. Audrey says, I went to the dentist on Thursday and I wore this fragrance. I specifically picked this one as I really needed something on my skin that would take me somewhere else. It certainly did the trick. Sleppy94 says, somehow it always turns into a story about some out-of-the-norm sexual relationship between the ingredients. You know why that is, Sleppy? Because we are animals at the end of the day, and the only thing that pushes our instinct of survival is sex. It's the sexuality that keeps the species going. And nature has made us that way, and has made that instinct so strong in us in order to preserve us. So there's no running away from it. There's no escaping it. It's, you embrace it, the sooner you embrace it, and the happier you'll be. And perfumes are exactly that. They're made by human beings to mimic the strongest of instincts. Anna says, I love this description. You're telling us a story. Intriguing. Thank you. So yeah, guys, thank you so much. I hope you've enjoyed this review. Madame says, loved this review. Thank you so much. Beautiful poem, says Lori. And then fade to your black sweater. Yes, and the gray background. You see, the background is now the color of ambergris, actually. Usually we have the blue background, but now we got the cement wall with all the grayness in it. We've transformed. It was a cathartic process, literally. Spraying the perfume, this is also something I wanted to represent with this video. You spray the perfume, you go through the emotion, you describe it, it evolves on your skin, you go through that poetic vision that it inspires you, and then you come out on the other side transformed. It's a cathartic process. Thank you guys so much for watching. Live every spray to the fullest, says Jack Dean. Love it. Thank you guys so much. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Thumb up this video if you've enjoyed it, and join my YouTube channel. Push that join button next to the subscription button. Become a member today. Gain access to extra perks, such as having your name listed in the bar scrolling here on the side as co-producers of the Fashion Bunker. Same applies to all of you who wish to join me on Patreon. superdacob all spelled together on Patreon. Your name will also be listed as in the end credits of every one of my videos as a co-producer of the Fashion Bunker. Thank you to all my members and patrons who have already pledged. And thank you to all my co-chatters that are here with me now, co-reviewing this perfume. Also, no, it's not chroma key. It's literally just one filter of the light, magic. Also, what I wanted to say, perfumes like these don't come often. They happen every once in a while. Some master nose gets a genius illuminating experience and creates something like this once in a blue moon. And it's perfumes like these that, like, when I smell them, I go like, oh, I'm so happy to be alive to have been able to experience something like this. Like, this is one of those perfumes that gives me that vibe. So thank you so much to Rich Mitch for having suggested to me this one and having described it so masterfully in our which perfumes to wear to funerals video together. Because if it wasn't for you, Rich Mitch, I wouldn't have discovered this beauty the way that I had to discover it. It was only thanks to you that I did. So guys, thank you everybody so much. The mythical incense, or as I want to call it, the mythological incense. And I thank you for watching this review. Until next time, never forget to never give up on love. Love you all. See you soon. Take care. Bye.